Good afternoon everybody, I'm Rick the Pilot Teacher, and in this video I'm going to show you what all these gauges do in my helicopter. Lots of you have been asking to give a quick description of what each one does, so this video is just for you. So up here top left is my voltage gauge. Basically this just tells me how much voltage my battery is putting out. So when I go switch the battery on, you can see it there, just over 26 volts. So that's good. I look at that before I start the engine to make sure I've got at least 20 volts when I'm starting the engine. A low voltage battery basically doesn't turn the engine over fast enough and it could lead to a hot start. Next to it, pretty important one, my fuel gauge. It's just a percentage. We have 540 litres on this helicopter, and that gauge basically just tells me the percentage that's left in the fuel tank. Pretty simple. 20% is usually the minimum that I want to be landing with in the Astar. Okay, this gauge here is a NG gauge, or gas generator gauge, and again it's in a percentage, and it just tells me how fast my gas generator turbine is spinning. And usually at the moment I'm starting to get up to around about 98% when I'm kind of taking off here on the fires. It's quite warm and quite heavy most of the time. So you've got the main needle around the edge, and then the smaller needle in the middle gives me the single percentages, so it makes it nice and easy to see when I'm coming up on, say, 95%, 96%, things like that. Next gauge is the T4 gauge. This is our T4 section of the gas turbine, and it's basically the temperature that the engine is. It's one of our limiting gauges, so basically it just tells me how hot the engine is. So as we pull more power, more fuel goes in, the fireball gets hotter. So as you can see, like all the gauges, you've got the green area, our yellow area, and our red and orange lines for our limitations. So that is the second of the engine gauges. The third one is the torque gauge here, and the torque gauge basically is how much power is coming out of the engine. So obviously the more power I pull, the higher the percentage reads, and so basically these three gauges here are what tell me how much power I can pull, and depending on which one of these three reaches the limit first is when I have to stop pulling power. At the moment it's my NG that's limiting me in my helicopter. Coming down the middle, we've got our fuel pressure. So on this aircraft we have just a single fuel pump that basically pumps the fuel up from the fuel tank to the engine when the engine is running, or when the fuel pump is on. So when I turn the fuel pump on, there we go, you can see that I'm getting just over about 0.5 of a bar pressure. So this is one thing that I want to check as I'm flying along, just to ensure that my fuel pump is supplying fuel to the engine. If my fuel pump fails, it doesn't matter too much because I've got an integrated fuel pump that works on a suction system that's driven on the engine. So if I lose my fuel boost pump, it's not too much of a problem. The next one down is my engine oil pressure. This is a very, very important one. If I lose my engine oil pressure, that is a bad day. So yeah, again, you can see there's a small green band there. I want my needle to be in that green band at all times whilst the engine is running. Next one below it, engine oil temperature. I'm really keeping an eye on that one at the moment, flying here on the fires and in the summer, because you don't want your engine to get too hot. Generally when I'm flying around at the moment, it'll sit at about 40 to 50 degrees, and then as I'm coming into holes, or if I'm hovering around or sitting on the ground hovering, it's going to be around about the 70 to 80, and then the cooling fan kicks on automatically and cools it down, tries to keep it around 70 degrees. Next one below that is my ammeter. Basically once my power is on, I just check that to make sure that there's nothing electrical that's pulling too much power. I watch this one pretty much when my oil temperature is up at 80 degrees, because then when the cooling fan kicks on, I can see that amp needle just kick over a tiny bit just when the fan starts up. So that's my ammeter. So these ones are basically just watching my engine, and then this one is just showing me how much current the items in my machine are pulling. Next we come up to the top. This is my caution and warning panel. So when I turn on, as you can see, they light up, and before I go flying I always do my warning light test, so I make sure that all the bulbs are working in there. And as you can see, there's a selection of all different kinds of things, from main gearbox temperature to a fire, to if I have a chip on one of my chip plugs, engine fuel filter starting to block, if I've got one of my cargo doors open, that kind of thing. So when I'm flying, this panel is all dim, there's nothing on, so then if a light comes on, it gets my attention really quickly. Okay, so as I come down, it's my main rotor RPM. Pretty important one. I want to make sure that my main rotor is maintaining RPM, because that is what is keeping me in the air. Usually when I'm flying, it's sitting around 390, give or take a couple of RPM, and it generally doesn't move when I'm flying around. The governor on the engine keeps the rotor RPM locked in pretty solid. Below that, my vertical speed indicator tells me how fast I'm climbing or how fast I'm descending. Generally 500 foot per minute rate of climb or rate of descent is all that I fly at. You don't need anything spectacular. Yeah, it just gives you an easy indication of how fast you're climbing or descending. Next is my airspeed indicator. Just like the speedo in your car, tells me how fast I'm going through the air. It's in knots. At the moment I'm usually cruising around about 100 knots. It's a little bit slower in the Astar because I've got the utility basket and squirrel cheek, so it creates a little bit of drag. So I'm definitely not able to fly as fast. But yeah, 100 knots is what I usually cruise around at. And my altimeter, you have to excuse the reflection of my leg in the window there. This one's quite a new altimeter, so the glass is really shiny. Basically, altimeter just tells me how high I am above the ground. At the moment, we have a pressure setting of 296.5, so that is the pressure that the aerodrome is at that I'm at the moment, and it changes as the weather systems move in. So the needle should match what the actual airport elevation is above sea level. That's one way that we're all flying around on the same pressure setting. So here on the fire, you've got you can't really see, it's all being blocked by the 212, but we've got about another 10 machines sitting down the runway here. We all fly on the same altimeter setting of 296.5 for today. So that way then when we're all flying around on the fire, we are all flying using the same datum. So here I have an engine air inlet filter. So basically if my filter starts to get clogged, it'll start to show me here that my filter is getting clogged. So what I can do in flight is I can open this, and it opens some doors at the back, and it bypasses the engine inlet filter, so I get air going into the engine. Generally not advisable, because then your air going into the engine is not filtered, but it's better than having no air go in and your engine goes quiet. Coming down, we have our emergency locator transmitter switch. Generally we never need to touch this because the emergency locator transmitter will automatically activate if there's a hard impact like a crash landing, but if you need to, you can just turn it to on and that will activate and bring in search and rescue. Stopwatch, it's pretty straightforward really. Start, stop, reset. I use this when I'm starting the engine, when I'm starting to lift off for flight, and I also use it to time my 2-minute cool down once I've landed. Pretty straightforward really. Then next to it here, I've just got a multifunction gauge. Again, this one is showing voltage. I can just scroll through outside air temperature in Fahrenheit, degrees C, and pressure, altitude, density, altitude, but generally keep it on voltage. It just kind of double checks with our voltmeter over here. Then on the left hand side, basically got our FM radio that I use to talk with the fire crews, both the control center and also the fire crews on the ground. Then I've got my satellite phone over here, and then the transponder. And the transponder basically allows air traffic control to see me on the radar. If they want to see me particularly, they can give me a squawk code, which I'll put in, and then they'll see exactly my call sign of the aircraft. Then below we just have the communications panel. So this is where it's split 50-50, so this is for the passenger side, this is for my side, and I can basically just switch over between all the radios to decide which one I'm going to be transmitting and listening to. So at the moment I'm listening to COM 1, COM 2 and the FM, which is for the fire crews, but I'm only going to be transmitting on COM 1, which is my main radio here. So that's the air-to-air between the pilots and air traffic control. And that, ladies and gents, is a basic instrument panel for a helicopter. Quite a few gauges, but each one is as important as each other. So between the information that all these gauges give me, it allows me to fly safely, and yeah, it just takes a quick scan every once in a while, just to quickly go over the gauges, just make sure everything's where it is, and yeah, there you go. That's how the helicopter tells me what it's up to. Well, that's what the gauges do. They just provide information to me so I know exactly what's going on with the aircraft. So if you like videos like this, definitely hit that subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, really helps the channel, makes more people find these videos, and I'll see you next time.